Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Q&A for Finders Course 10. This is Jeffrey Martin. We're going to, as we always do for something like this, give people a little bit of time to connect in. Doesn't happen instantaneously for everyone, so we want to make sure that nobody is excluded. I'm going to go ahead and mute my microphone for just a little bit before too terribly long to kick it all off and get started. I look forward to chatting with y'all. Bye-bye.
Hello.
All right, it looks like Nicole's joined us, so people are still coming in here a little bit. I think it's probably safe to maybe get started in another minute or so. So let's give people one more minute. We're still kind of flooding in here, and then we'll get started. So in the meantime, I'm going to mute and keep my camera off. Okay, I think we've pretty well stabilized. How's everybody doing out there? It's good to see you. I'm Jeffrey Martin, if you don't recognize my face. And you can see also Nicole Bradford is on the call.
Hi, everybody.
Get it kicked off here. We are going to do a Q&A for you, a live Q&A. I think as some of you saw, we sent out a form that allowed you to ask questions to us ahead of time. And we went through those about an hour or so ago before the call. So if actually they came in later than an hour or so, we've kind of not seen them probably. But we sorted through and picked some out to kick the call off with. And then we're going to go ahead and pay attention to the chat area. If you have questions as we go along, you can go ahead and ask them in the chat area, and that should work just great. Nicole can probably keep an eye on that if I'm talking, and I'll keep an eye on that when she's talking, and we'll take it from there. Okay, so quite a few questions actually that revolved around the results. And so I wanted right up front to put a sticky thing in the chat to nonsymbolic.org/publications. And if you look on that webpage, what you'll see is that there's, at the very top of the page, there's a summary paper, one for academics and one for everybody else. So unless you're an academic, frankly, even if you are an academic, probably you should just read the one for everybody else. And that will really sort of take you to the meat of the original research in terms of persistent non-symbolic experience and how we define it and how we break it down across locations and all of that kind of stuff. Now, for Finder's course research, a couple of links down, there's a Jeffrey Mishlove interview. He has a very interesting podcast called New Thinking Aloud, which is a continuation of a longtime PBS series that he did. So I think there's that link. And then after that link, there's a link to a presentation that was given at the Society for Consciousness Studies meeting at Yale University last year, last June. And it has really a just incredibly meticulous breakdown of all of the statistics from what we consider the official experimental, the initial experimental part. And that actually gets to another person's question, which is sort of how do we break all these things down with FC1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 and 6 and 7 and 8 and 9 and all of that. It's actually pretty simple, and you can see it in the research presentations as well. So Finder's course 1 through 4 were the quote-unquote official experiment involving the core of the Finder's course itself. And that's really where we were trying to figure out, is this protocol that we had been experimenting with for quite a while before that effective for groups of kind of random people drawn from the public? I saw Rebecca from Finder's Course 1 in the chat when I was sort of getting ready for this, and so I know there's at least one FC1 person out there. There were 6 people in FC1, 5 of them finished it successfully, and people reported transition to 1 over the course of that, or within a couple of weeks of it ending. And so those people, I'll let her share her experience if she wants to or not in the chat window. That's totally up to her. And so that was really a group that was drawn from various mailing lists. We'd written a book called The Fourth Awakening, which was a fiction book that was designed to help us find research subjects out there in the public. And we had some other mailing lists like that that were drawn from other publications and things. And so we basically just sent out a message to people that were on those lists saying, hey, we're thinking of doing this pilot class. And that's really what kicked it all off a few years ago or so at this point. Of course, 1 through 4, the pilot was just 6 people, and then 2, 3, and 4 were generally around 60 people. 4 was 80 people. We tested 20 people more in sort of a different type of environment. But that was very standardized, and that was really sort of the rigorous core of the experiment. Now, I've seen some people asking about how do we conceive of the experiment? You know, were there control groups? Was there blinding? All of that. One of the issues that meditation research suffers from really across the board is an impossibility, really, for doing things like blinding or placebo exercises or whatever else. It's pretty darn hard to do a large-scale meditation. And to find people who have never heard of any form of meditation at all, and then somehow have those be the lucky ones that get randomized into a control group, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So that's that sort of gold standard, double-blind medical model type of research that people often hear about. It's really not acceptable. Really not something that's even possible from a meditation standpoint. There's also ethical issues surrounding it. You know, we've run our protocol and our protocol design by really quite a few people, quite a large number of people within the academy. When anytime you're designing any sort of experiment or anything like that, that's what you do basically. You just kind of ask everybody you know to add their 2 cents to figure out how to make it better, to try to figure out what it is that you didn't see, what it is that that you may have missed in creating the design of the experiment and such. And so we did that same thing for the Finder's Course experiments. And one of the things that came out of that I actually didn't even think about is that there were literally ethical concerns around having blinded groups, or having a group that was told they were going through this 4-month, very long, time-intensive sort of process when in fact they weren't doing that. And so anyway, the whole field of meditation basically suffers from a similar issue. So it uses a different type research, and if you're an academic, you're probably familiar with the fact that there are a wide array of what are considered acceptable sort of gold standard forms of research. Like the public is often most the medical model type stuff, but this isn't medicine, and so it's not necessarily the type of thing that you would follow. So from our standpoint, what we did is we basically kept running Finder's courses until we reached a level of statistical validity. And that was at the end of Finder's Course 4 for us. And so Finder's Course 1 through 4 were basically what we consider the core of the experiment. They're really the thing that validated more than anything else that the protocol worked in terms of actually transitioning people to ongoing non-symbolic experience. And so we follow a very careful peer review system for this. The way that you do peer review when you have ongoing research is that you don't publish it, you present it at academic conferences. And the reason for that is because when you have a room full of 100 people, or even if it's just 5 or 20 interested people, or maybe it's 1,000 people, and I've spoken at academic conferences that have all those numbers of people, and you're presenting your findings, then you open it up essentially to questions and over the coals, if you will. So it's the best, I think it's really the best form of peer review. When you publish a journal article, what happens is the editor looks it over, a couple of people look it over, they often suggest a few changes, and then the thing goes into the journal. So not very many people see it, you don't get much feedback. It's kind of the thing that you do at the very end of the process. If you're not at the very end of the process, if you have the research ongoing, then what you do is you travel around and you present at as many relevant conferences really as you can, especially if you can get into like the big and important ones in your area. And the Finder's Course has been presented all the big and important ones in the consciousness space, and oftentimes for many years. So, and it's had everything from, it's had workshops done on it. It's had the main presentations, which are called plenary presentations, done on it. It's had concurrent, which is like a secondary form of presentation done on it. It's had a third tier, which is called a poster presentation done on it. So you name it, it's basically been vetted from every which way from Sunday. And we're not done with it yet. When we are done with it, then we'll transition it into that publication phase. And that's why when you go to the publications page at nonsymbolic.org, when you go to publications and you see the summary paper that's there, that's really the draft paper that we've been floating around the community that will eventually, when we're confident that we've reached the end of our data collection and that document is just solid and it says exactly what we want it to say, then we'll submit it for publication. It's been solicited. Actually, that paper's been asked for by so many journals at this point to publish, but I still do not feel that it is done. And so, or that the research underneath it is just, I think there's just a few more nuances that we can get in there. And so that's one of the things that's come out of the Finder's Course is all of those nuances. It allowed us to do for the first time this A-B data collection, which means we can figure out who you are right now before you transition to ongoing non-symbolic experience. And then we can measure you in a bunch of ways again, the same ways, after transition, and we can figure out exactly what changed with you. And that's incredibly important and valuable data that is not currently in that paper, because that paper was really written in its draft form and all of that prior to the Finder's Course and prior to AB data. So that's just the B data version right now. And that's what I mean by there's more to add, and we're excited to do that. So we present it all the time. It's peer reviewed all the time. And that, I hope, answers some of the questions around the research. Okay, so let me go through some more of your questions here. there was one other thing about that, and that is, well, what is one? Finder score is 5, 6, 7, 8. How come that's not mentioned in the research presentations and all of that? The reason is because those are really kind of divided up as sub-experiments. And so once the data was very solid in FC1 through 4, then we started to experiment around. We started to try to test different variations of it. So for, as an example, we allowed some spiritual teachers who were already very, very highly developed to use the protocol just to see what would happen with them. We allowed people for the first time to retake just to see what would happen with them. And so we did offline groups. We did a couple of offline groups, for instance, in India, just to see how that would go. What if it wasn't done online, as an example? And so throughout this process, we've really been trying to learn as much as we can about what the protocol actually makes available. And we've kind of finished that around the end of last year. And then we didn't really run one of these for about a year or so. I think it was about 8, 9 months. And until we started thinking to ourselves, you know, the devices are mature enough that now it makes sense to run another Finder's course, because maybe we can get some additional neat data off of things like heart rate measurement, things like GSR measurement, which is simply measuring the differences in the electrical resistance in the skin, if you will. What about EEG? We started to think about incorporating devices like this polar heart strap that you'd wear if you were an FC10 or 9, which was the pilot. It sort of goes around your chest. And then we have an eSense device. So this is our eSense device, and it's just very simple. It plugs into your cell phone with just the jack here. And then there's just a couple of electrodes, if you can see them here, and you basically just peel them off and you stick them on as we tell you to stick them on, sort of like that. And so we thought, you know, there's some interesting new data. Things have moved along enough, technologically wise, that we can collect some interesting data. This is the Muse headband, which you wear. Yes. You can see it's got some sensors up here and back here. But we're going to use for brainwave measurement. You can see some of the sensors there if I hold it up this way. All right. Oh, and incidentally, if you've got a newer Muse, this is an older Muse, you'll only have one of these ports. So don't think that you got the wrong one. You have a great one. You just have the newer version. And this is the older version that I've got with me here today. So we really thought to ourselves, okay, well, let's do a pilot and see if it makes sense to collect this data, see if it even can be collected, all of that. And we saw really, really interesting stuff in a preliminary way in the data. And so we decided to run Finder's Course 10 at a much larger scale. So that's what we're answering questions about today. So that's the difference between like the first core part of the experiment, which is Finder's Course 1 through 4, and Finder's Course 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9, and what we're doing with. Hopefully that makes sense. I don't know if Nicole wants to add anything to that or not before we move on to another question here. And we'll see. Okay, nope, she's good.
That's good.
So I have another question here. There's some greatest hits questions that came in on the forum, and so that's great. I figure we'll just knock them out because they're the ones that people often ask. So another question, and this is from Jonathan in Singapore, who I have a feeling is my friend Jonathan in Singapore, a fellow academic at the National University of Singapore. If it's you, Jonathan, I don't know if you're on or not, but if you are, hello. If not, you'll probably watch the video maybe in your time zone. How sustainable are the changes that participants have made? Data. So one of the issues that we have had is that we really do require an enormous amount of academic measures. And so there's a few hours that go into the beginning, middle, and end of the program. And if you send people the same measures 6 months later or a year later, you just don't get everybody sending them back. You get a subset of people sending them back, and that's very helpful. But you don't get the full picture before and after the actual course itself. And so we have an issue like everyone does with follow-up data dropping off and stuff like that. So we've solved that in a variety of different ways. We've done alumni engagement events. We've done personalized alumni follow-ups. We've done interviews at different intervals. Right now, we're running something called the Explorers course with 100 alumni in it. And we picked some alumni who transitioned in the course, some who didn't transition in the course, some of those who were temporary, and some of those who were among those who didn't experience anything from the course. As you know, about 1% of people don't even get a glimpse of non-symbolic experience, though 99% of people get at least a glimpse, and typically about 73% of people transition to a persistent form of ongoing non-symbolic experience in the course. So we had all of those groups represented in the Explorers course, and that's been moving forward for about 8 months, which has been really fantastic. That's been a really, really helpful ongoing longitudinal data collection effort. And so that's what we do. And the answer is that the changes that participants make are very sustainable. However, I will caveat that by saying that it depends on how deep someone lands into the continuum. And so if someone deep into ongoing non-symbolic experience, they're less likely to sort of, be shaken out of it after the program. If they fall a little bit more on the shallow end of ongoing non-symbolic experience, then it really is something that you've got to cherish and value and prioritize so that it does stay with you. It can absolutely stay with you. It should absolutely stay with you. But if you just chuck it all, to the wind and basically go back to, lifestyle choices that aren't conducive to it or whatever else, certainly you can pull yourself out of it. And so we see most people. There are a couple of people. There are some people who get pulled out of it. There's some people who are temporary who wind up in it. So there is some fluctuations, but generally speaking, it's a quite stable pattern. This person also asked, Jonathan also asked, what do you think are the key ingredients of success of the transformations people have made? Support, content, whatever. I think it's very simple. I think it's really the cocktail that is the course itself and the dedication that people bring to the course. It doesn't matter if you've got the cocktail if you don't have the dedication, and it doesn't matter if you have the dedication if you don't have the cocktail. This protocol really is something very, very special. I don't think there's even a way for me to convey the sense of honor that I feel around, being able to offer it to people. I mean, it seems kind of miraculous in terms of its results. It's incredible. Having said that, we of course rigorously researched the crap out of it, right? So we know it's not a miracle or whatever. I don't want you to take that miracle term as being some sort of spiritual term or something like that. It's just that the results are so incredibly consistent and so incredibly surprising. And even when we run versions of the course where we try to break something, break this or that, it still shows up. And in fact, in Finder's Course 9, I thought this is going to be a really risky pilot because the software is kind of buggy. The devices, you're putting stuff on you're just taping stuff to your fingers. There's just like all these extra concerns and worries that you have while you're sitting down. You got to keep an eye on the devices. You got to wire yourself up, all that. And still, 3 weeks from the end of the course, while I was checking on how many people reported a transition to ongoing non-symbolic experience, we hit the 72%. And the week after that, we hit the 73 percentile mark. And so despite all of sort of the additional distractions of having the sauces and all of that, the course wound up being sufficiently robust yet again to overcome that. And coming into Finder's Course 10, you're going to have a much more polished experience of all of this. We ran the pilot to work out the kinks. These were the folks who had like half a course of kinks, and still it produced the results that we've seen in the past. And so I think that's really incredible. So I really think it's the cocktail. And that it's the dedication that people bring to it. Let's see here.
There's a few questions.
Rebecca actually asked if the tech is more of a research tool for you, or does it actually assist a person engaging where they are relative to the shift of consciousness? So there will be no feedback that you receive from these devices at all. Those devices only exist to collect data for us to analyze in very sophisticated mathematical ways, and probably for a considerable period of time, at least months, possibly even a year or over a year, before we really know what we're looking at. results. And so it's important for you to realize that we're opening Find Yours Course 10 essentially to get this data. The benefit to you is that you get the opportunity to use the protocol to transition to ongoing non-symbolic experience, and you have to wire yourself up to the devices to participate. However, the devices are only used to collect data. They are not designed to provide you with any sort of feedback. They're not designed to provide you with anything sort of customized and coming back in your direction. We hope that at some point we will be able to provide that for everyone, not just for you. And as a result of your efforts and as a result of your kindness and participating in this course and all of that. However, that's not what's going to happen. I think Nicole wanted to say something.
Yes, but I think the thing that I would add is that everybody is keeping the devices. They have those devices, and they will learn in the program how to use those devices. And so that's something that you get to keep, you get to continue to use, and outside of the data that you're doing through Neuromore, the app that we're using, you can use the devices in any way that you choose.
Absolutely, and there's all kinds of software out there for them. And let's see, another question. I think that your offer to share this, this is from Philip in New Jersey. Hello, Philip, if you're out there. I think that your offer to share this work with us so that we may benefit is awesome. Thank you. I think it really feels like it's just sort of the universe doing its thing from my perspective anyway. I'm very grateful to just sort of hear. I know that you are requiring serious practitioners in order to have a successful experiment. And let me just comment on that. We're serious participants, but not necessarily practitioners. So if by practitioner you mean experienced meditators or something like that, we've had a wide variety of people in the course. We've had people who've never meditated before, done any spiritual practice or any mental or philosophical practice or anything. And we've had people who have tried everything. I'd say we've had who tried everything and tried absolutely nothing, but we've got a really good spread of people who tried everything from nothing to a little to dabbling at stuff over the years to people who have just been going at it for decades, trying everything that they can possibly try. We don't necessarily need success. We don't need serious practitioners per se, but we do need you to be a serious participant. We really need you to come, show up, engage, and work the system, because if you don't work the system, you really can't expect the results. It really is. It does seem to be just at this point. But will you be able to accommodate some breaks, as it might be difficult over the holidays, as it might be difficult to attend the course during this time? Well, so the course doesn't start during the holidays, so you're okay there. We've had some of our most successful experiments during the holidays, which is kind of fun. It's really kind of fun to read the weekly surveys around Christmas. The first year we were like nervous about that. We're like, oh, should we run an experiment over Christmas? But it wound up actually being really perfect, because it's like a crucible. It's like a family crucible, right? And so people are with their families and kinds of tension and stuff. It's really cool because people will reply on their surveys that they're like, you know, I just didn't react. My sister tried to, you know, stick it to me, and when I didn't react, like the entire family dynamic just changed. This was like a totally different Christmas than I've ever experienced before. And so those are fun to read. So I don't really care if we run one during Christmas. In fact, I think we should, because people really see like how much has changed when we do that. But this time we're not. We're starting it in early January, and that's because it's a Sophia University course as well, and they have fixed quarters, and those quarters start on certain days, just like all university classes do, and stuff like that. So it starts on January 14th, and that skips all the holidays, but we're using all of this time, January 14th, to make sure you have time to get your devices, to get your Muse, and to get your eSense GSR device, and to get your heart rate strap and all of that, and to get it working and whatnot. So you don't have to worry about holidays. However, I would say that we absolutely, you know, we've had so many people go through the course at this point, and everybody's just out there living their life. We've had I mean, we've had marriages break up during the course, or being in the process of breaking up with all of the turmoil that involves. It's involved with that. People that were, were like in the divorce process before they came into the course and were going through the divorce process while they were in it. We've had very, very close immediate family members get very ill, even pass on. We've had, endless business travelers and stuff like that. Of course, lots of people have to put in their vacation, at the beginning of a yearly cycle or something. And so we've had lots of vacations that were hit. We had people go on retreats because they were booked and paid for a long time earlier. You name it. So it's flexible to a degree, but I would say, even though it's done a really good job of accommodating all of these things in previous courses, I always like to stress that it's very, very important protocol to the greatest extent that you can and as seriously as you can. And so even though, yes, there's some wiggle room in there because it's 4 months of your life and stuff's just going to happen over 4 months, nonetheless, I really do feel that it's important that you try to clear as much space as you possibly can for the program, because I always tell people, this program is a formula. And if you decide that you're going to skip a step in the formula, you have to be a little careful of that, because there's some kind of impact, and there's no telling whether that's going to have an impact that has some sort of adverse relationship with your ability to transition to ongoing non-symbolic experience. So on the one hand, it's been to this point, people's lives there's all these sort of things that they have scheduled, and but on the other hand, I think it's very, very important to clear as much space for this as you can, to talk to your spouse if you have one, to get them to help with stuff with the kids, to just really clear as much space as you possibly can, so that you can really buckle down. You're only going to have the opportunity to take this for the first time one. I cannot stress strongly enough how you want to make that count. So that's what I would say about it. I don't know if Nicole has anything she'd like to add on there.
No, I'm answering questions in the chat while
Great.
you're talking.
Okay, wonderful. I guess just chime in if you. Okay, next one from Arlene in Massachusetts. Hello, Jeffrey. Thank you for this opportunity. 2 things. First, have you thought any more about accumulating a statistic about the population involved that are interested in awakening? Some react like there are not many people involved in awakening, and others say there are millions like me. Well, we think it's about 0.5%. We think it's about 8 to 0.5% of the population, but there really isn't a way to know. And the reason for that is because it's very difficult to actually just ask a survey question in something like a Gallup poll and get at it. People have actually been trying to do this for over 100 years. And if you look at the results, they've been pretty miserable. And these are not dumb people. I mean, really, really smart, awesome, amazing people have been trying this. And so, and the answer is, depending on how you phrase it, you get back 30% of the population saying, oh, that's me, 80% of the population saying that's me, and saying that's me. And that's just for temporary versions of the experience. And then typically when those people are followed up with more in-depth research from the researchers that commissioned those studies or that put the question in a polling thing like Gallup or whatever, you have that drop down to single digits or very, very low double digits. And that's just for the temporary version experiences. And so I think there's this sort of conception among part of the public, especially the people that are into awakening, that, oh, everybody experiences this maybe at a temporary level or whatever else. But when it's really dug into, and those numbers have been pretty consistent, and literally they go back to the turn of the century even. So I don't know how we can do that. Just because of the sort of the despair of prose, if you will, just because of sort of the language issues involved in that. So we try to estimate as best we can. We think it's about 0.3 to 0.5% of the population, but we could be totally wrong with that. And when I say that, I don't mean like worldwide, about in developed English-speaking countries. Let's see, second. that you are only reaching those who are above a middle-class income, and those at the bottom of the income strata are left out of your research. Have you thought of a way to correct this, like grants or crowdfunding, etc.? So this is the largest crowd-funded experiment of its kind in this space. It would be awesome if, like, the National Institutes of Health or National Science Foundation or any of the big sort of degree grant sort of administering arms of the government or large foundations or whatever else would be interested in getting behind this type of research. But to date, that has not been the case for anyone really involved in this. And so we've solved that problem by basically taking this and making it a crowdfunded. I really think we have, at this point, the largest crowdsourced and crowdfunded experiment in this. I think so far we've raised somewhere around $600,000 for research in the space, and probably with other resource donations and stuff like that, it's close to $1 million that we've been able to apply, which is, I think, why we've had such huge success. It really does take resources to move things forward, and so that's how we've been able to make it happen. We are cognizant that there's an income cutoff from a finder's course standpoint. That was not the case for the earlier research. For the first part of the research, which involved 1,200 or so individuals who experienced PNSE all around the world, a wide breadth in terms of demographics. And so the base that all of this is built upon is a very broad demographic. The finder's course, it is true, does come in at a certain socioeconomic level. We're also mindful of other things. For instance, there's, we're basically have only done any research across this whole thing on English-speaking people. Now, language or your third language or whatever else, but I've got to be convinced while I'm doing an interview with you that you're sufficiently able to communicate with English for me to get the details that I need out of it. And so there are all kinds of limitations associated with this. One of the things that we joke about a little bit in psychology is that virtually everything that we know about human psychology comes from 18 to 22-year-old undergraduates at major research universities. That's pretty much who participates in all the studies. So at least we're not that narrow. At least we're sort of broken beyond that. But yeah, absolutely. We absolutely think about the limitations, and we think about how to go beyond them. We've tried to give away the course a number of times. We tried to give it away in its entirety online for my birthday last year, the year before, I don't remember when. We really put a lot of money and a lot of time, spent $30,000, $40,000, something like that. Really put our backs into it. Dedicated a couple of months to try to make that work. Didn't have a single person that I know of go through it all the way from beginning to end. Sort of cherry picked it and very seriously. We have experimented with allowing people to take the course for free, essentially. Almost none of those people complete the course. So we've also, one of the things around pricing is that we've also tried to figure out what the pricing levels are where there's the least amount of dropout rate. Generally speaking, we have somewhere around a 15%, 15 to sometimes 20% dropout rate in each of the courses, which is if you know anybody who does online courses, you know that they're happy when like 10% of people complete the online course. So we have an enormous number of people that complete it by comparison. But we have noticed that if we make the price too low, or if we make the price free, that those numbers go up hugely. You've really got to put your back into it. This is a very serious program. And one of the psychological impacts to make people sort of follow through with it is the fact that it's not inexpensive. So we've got a bunch of sort of psychological things like that to help pull people through the course, and that's one of them. So absolutely. Let's see, I'm gonna pause there. Okay, looks like Nicole's still answering another one. Leave their name, just H, and I don't know where they're from. Said, what are the techniques being used? So I always get this question. There's about 26 meditation techniques, and then there's positive psychology techniques, and mental training type techniques and whatnot that form the basis of this cocktail. Some of these techniques are very, very, very close to each other. So sometimes in the 26 techniques, there will be techniques that are just one shade off from a previous version, and then maybe another shade off in the next version, things like that. So they're not radically different. We don't publish those. We don't make those techniques widely available. And the reason is that when we tested doing that, people basically did not systematically work their way through them in the order that we asked them to. And as a result, they cherry-picked the techniques that they felt that they hadn't already tried. And then they didn't get any of the benefits. And so we feel like it's a disservice, actually, to just sort of publish the techniques, because nobody takes it seriously when you do that. It really does have to be part of a very specific sequence that takes place in a very specific series of steps, and so on. And so we're here for impact. We're trying to figure out how you can make a scalable version of this and how you can really impact billions and billions of people in the world. And you can't do that if people ultimately don't take advantage of the discoveries that come out of the research. So available, make the categories available. We talked about the broad categories and stuff like that. In the free version that we gave away, we talked a lot about the techniques, which also would just reinforce the same thing that we'd seen before, that there was just cherry picking and people didn't systematically go through it and all of that. So, so if you wonder why we don't talk about it, that's why, because we're basically just doing you a disservice. Michael from British Columbia. We have small groups that we use in the course, and he asks, will our small groups be mentored? Will we receive an individualized precision meditation report that's analyzed all of our data? Is there any kind of follow-up after the Finder's course ends? Besides the Explorer's course, can you say anything about the Explorer's course and all that? So we did experiment with mentored groups, and we didn't see an advantage to them, so we didn't continue with them. So these will not be mentored groups. You already know that there won't be a precision meditation report after we've analyzed all of the data that we're promising. We may do that. I wouldn't rule out doing that. But that's a ways away. And so, I'm not gonna say that we're gonna promise anything like that. We're hoping that something amazing and valuable comes from this data. I personally believe that it will, but research, you never know what's gonna come. Is there any kind of follow-up after the course ends besides the Explorer's course? Well, really, it is the Explorer's course. We do have jumping off resources and stuff like that. There's like techniques in the course, and some people have offered, if it's one resonates with you, for instance, with that technique, things like that kind of stuff exists. There's like an alumni forum where people meet, exchange stuff. There's things like that. But really, the guts of it at this point is the Explorer's course. When I was first doing this, I thought that there were all kinds of awesome teachers and stuff out there, and that when people finished the Finder's course and they transitioned to ongoing non-symbolic experience, they would just naturally find who could sort of help them contextualize it and integrate it into their life and all of that, and that absolutely didn't work. And so as a result of that, about a year ago or so, we started to conceive of a follow-on course, a follow-on program, and that's called the Explorer's course, and we're in maybe month 8 or 9 of that right now. So it's been going for quite a while as an experiment with about 100 people. We're alumni of the program. I don't know if we will offer that again as a separate course. I told, and I've been upfront about that right from the beginning. The first people that came into the Explorer's course, I said, this could very well be a one-off course. We may never offer this again. We haven't announced a second one. We don't have a second one on the books, but what I have been doing, and we're just starting it with FC9, is we're taking some of the key content from the Explorer's course and we're adding it to the end of the Finder's course to sort of to help with the support of that transition. So we're taking the things that have sort of really proven themselves out in the Explorer's course, and we're adding them as additional weeks of content. If you think about it, sort of free, bonus, unadvertised until now. I'm telling you about it now. But not on the pages anywhere or whatever. So content up actually and ready to go. It's in the FC9 course room right now. It's been loaded into the FC10 course room as well. And so that is available, and that frankly is amazing. Very unique position because I've just, we have such a huge research. And we've been able to see so many trends around life integration and things that potholes that you can fall into and stuff like that with this, and really how to maximize this experience moving forward in life. I've been really, really pleased with the way the Explorers course has gone and the way the Explorers course has turned out to this point. I'm so thrilled, every time someone shows up in our programs and they really, really give it a whirl. And that's been the case with the Explorers course, just like it's been with the Finders course, and the results have been really more than I'd hoped for. And so I'm excited to take some of the best nuggets of wisdom and then transpose it essentially into the end of the Finders course to support people who are coming out the end of that process. I think that's what I would say about those questions. Just pause for see if there's anything Nicole has to add, and then I'll go on to the next question here. Questions from alumni asking how they can help out with Finders Course 10. It's back like Finders Course 1 through 4 is, which means like rigorous experiment land. And so we are not introducing, aside from the devices, but we piloted those in Finders Course 9, we are not introducing any additional variables into Finders Course 10. So Finders Course 10 is just like sort of core original Finders Course 1 through 4 research, where it really down and solid, just as much variable control as possible, all that kind of stuff. So translation, nothing that you can do actually in the course itself. I thank you all so much for writing in. I'm just so grateful that you're always willing to help out, and it's just so wonderful. I hope you know how much we appreciate you. However, I would say, because I think there's a real advantage to one of the things that we've seen over time is that there's a real advantage to going through the course when you have an alumni that's a friend of yours. You, of course, have your small group for support, and that's awesome. But there's something extra that an alumni who's a friend can add. I'm not talking about like somebody that's in your course as a mentor or in that group or whatever else, because as I mentioned, we didn't necessarily see anything that made us believe that we should justify the complexity of doing that every time. But I do think that there is something powerful about having a friend or a family member or whatever who has taken the course before you and can kind of be there with that perspective. And you basically know the rules. And so not to tell them what's coming up and all of that kind of stuff. And so you can really support them in some very unique ways. And so I would say, we've got already in Finders Course 10, we've got tons of, referrals of friends and family and stuff like that, just like we always do in the Finders course. So that's great, but I would say that's really it, because we have to keep Finders Course 10 just really, really strict and really, really tight and really rigorous. And so we can't kind of have you as a new variable sort of in there. But thank you. All right. I have a concern. This is Cecilia from New York. I have a concern regarding the technical skill level required to do the course. What percentage of the course requires equipment? Basic tech support available. So I've showed you the pieces of equipment. It's basically, let me get my camera back up and answer the questions. So it's this guy, which is the Muse headband. This guy, which is the Polar heart strap. And it's this guy, it's the eSense device. You'll also order these electrodes separately. It's pretty darn easy to use all of this, right? I mean, I think you saw me literally just stick this guy right on like that. My camera isn't low enough to show the chest strap, but this just literally loops around your chest, slide in the clasp, and it's just like this around your chest. And you can, if you can wet the electrodes and stuff, it's usually a good idea to just put a little bit of water on those. And then literally this is as easy as, and so there's two of them. So And I think we may use the palms for this experiment. I'm not sure if we use the fingers or the palms yet. We're testing out some stuff there. So you'll either stick them like that. You know, maybe you'll stick them down here like this. But either way, super, super easy. And then all of these things go into your smartphone. Super, super easy. It tells you, it basically says, okay, this one, you know, oh, your Muse needs a little bit tighter connection, so maybe you have to, you know, push the Muse in a little bit more or something like that. So it provides a little feedback so that you know that you've got a good connection across the different devices. And then when that's taken care of, select the session and you say go, and then you meditate. You're done meditating, you pick your phone back up and you say stop. And then you answer a couple of questions like how good was this, how good did you feel the session was for you, and things like that. And then it uploads the data to us, and that's it, you're done. So it's very, very simple. You know, we've tried to make it as simple as we possibly could. And I hope that we've gotten the vast majority of the debugging out in the pilot that we ran. That's one of the reasons that we ran the pilot. And so there's, of course, tech support available. There's tech support available from the device manufacturers themselves, software. There's tech support available from us. And so, you know, we want the data. We're basically trying to do everything humanly possible to get the data, right? This is an enormous amount of time and effort and, you know, investment and everything else to get this data. So it's very, very important to us that we make it as easy as possible for you and as supported a process as possible for you. So I wouldn't worry about it at all. If you're not a technical person, whatever, we've made it simple as we can make it. We're gonna have all kinds of support. Let's see, a question from Nick in San Francisco about the daily time commitment. This is on the page that you can see when you go to register for the course. It has all of the requirements. So if you haven't looked at that page, and there's a video of me talking about this and stuff on the page. So if you haven't looked at that page yet, I highly encourage you to do that. You can get to that from finderscourse.com website and click apply, and it should be the next page that pops up there, and has the video and has the requirements and all that kind of stuff, has which smartphones are allowed and the whole bit. Incidentally, the list of smartphones are those phones and newer. So if you don't see your phone on there but it's newer than the models that are on there, that's totally fine. And then let's see what else here. And where are you, Merv? Huh? I'm just going to guess New Zealand. It's Christchurch, so probably New Zealand. If you're listening, maybe you're listening on the recording. Could be a wrong time of day for you there. Dates of the next course, cost and commitment, online versus in-person course. So the dates, we're getting ready to sort of close out the core batch of seats in the next day or so. And then we always kind of follow a similar process, which is that we look at who's come in and we look at what we want in terms of a balanced research population, and we ask ourselves, where are the holes? And so we're actually not, you know, all seats won't be totally 100% gone in the next few days, but the vast majority of them will, and you would have to get really, really lucky to fall into like one of our areas that we need a few more participants. Like, you know, well, we need a few more 50-year-old women in the UK, right? It's probably not most of you. So the bulk of the course registration really does conclude in the next few days. If you want a seat, basically, that's your chance. So then it starts, as I mentioned, on January 14th, because that's the start of the semester at Sophia University. It's a 6-credit course with Sophia University. It can be applied to their programs or transferred to other universities because Sophia is regionally accredited, which is the highest standard of accreditation in America. Let's see, the cost and commitment, it's $2,000. And normally it's $2,500, but we're doing it by $500 because you've got to buy the Muse, and you've got to buy the polar heart strap, and you've got to buy the eSense, and you've got to buy the electrodes and all of that separate. We have a page where we've negotiated discounts and stuff. We're not taking any percentages or anything like that on any of that equipment. So we basically have cut what we think are good deals with various manufacturers and stuff. But you don't have to order from our page. You can get it from, there's cheaper deals out there, especially it's Christmas time, right? So maybe you can find like some crazy cheap deal here and there. We're just coming off Black Friday or Cyber Monday and all of that. But then we're also right into the Christmas season where there's all kinds of crazy sales and stuff. And so, you know, you can order this stuff from wherever you want. You just got to make sure you get it as soon as you possibly can, because you've got to start getting familiar with it and all that. So the cost and commitment is $2,000 plus about another $500, probably slightly less than $500 to get all your equipment and your electrodes and stuff like that. It's only an online course. There is no in-person course. We did experiment with that a couple of times. We had a couple of groups at Oroville in India. I don't know if you're familiar with that or not, very, very famous spiritual community in India, where we experimented with an offline version of the course. That went really well, so we know the course can run offline. But you know, for our purposes of the experiment and the data collection and all of that, it's just really convenient to have it all be online, and it allows us a lot of reach in terms of where people can be, so it gives us more participant diversity, stuff like that. So it's an entirely online course. I think that's the end of the questions that came in ahead of time. So let me ask Nicole what she's seeing out there, and if there's anything else that she wants to address, or if there's anything that me to address.
Well, I think there's a round of questions on what are some of the personal habits that people may or may have to give up. Like one particular, do you have to stop drinking coffee? I let them know that no, thank goodness. But you might want to add some more on that.
I have a friend who you may know. He's kind of a well-known author in the spiritual space named Deepak Chopra. And Deepak, for years, when people asked him, do you have any vices? He would say, well, I drink coffee. But in the last few years, the research has come out that like coffee is good for you in some ways or whatever. So he's like, doesn't have to. He's like, you know, I no longer have to say I have any vices. So you don't have to. You don't have to give up coffee. You don't have to give up alcohol. You don't have to give up anything. You basically just continue to live your life. You don't have to shift your diet. You don't have to take up yoga. You don't have to do any of those things. You basically just need 1.5 a day at the beginning of the course. And that goes up by week 3 to about 2 to 2.5 hours a day. Towards the second half of the course, can stay at that level, although we encourage people to spend even more time, so maybe 3 hours or so a day. And you know, aside from finding that time, aside from being able to set aside that time, really serious and really, really committed, there's really nothing else that you got to do.
And let's see, there was one question, I think you just answered it. Is it every day? Yes. So from the moment we start, we're going to be spending a lot of time together, and you'll hear more from us either, and spend more time with your, you're going to be spending a lot of time with us and a lot of time with your group. And at the, you know, and it's going to be very, very intense. So you have to be prepared for that. And the meditation block, at least for the data collection, is that minimum of 1 hour unbroken block, plus the additional time that Jeffrey mentioned, but you have to have at least that one unbroken block hour from the day that you start to the end. Yes, we know sometimes that things come up in people's lives. So like Jeffrey said, you know, we're not doing it during Christmas and other things like that. But you know, you really are, if you enter this course, you're really making the commitment that this is a part of your life for the next 4 months.
You know, I see that there's a link. Some requests for where do you get this kind of thing. Pop up should be able to pop up a link here. On. be more questions than that. I get pummeled with questions all the time. There's got to be more that you want to know out there, not just about Finders Course 10. It can also be about PNSE in general. I haven't done one of these live Q&As in quite a long time. Maybe the end of 2015, or maybe at the end of 2014, and another one in 2015. It's been a while. It's been a long, long while. At least a year. So, you know, feel free to fire away. Do you wear all the biofeedback gear for the short sessions too? I'll just start reading some of these. You wear them for the meditations. You wear them for group meditations as well. There are morning and evening exercises that you do, things just upon waking, things just upon going to bed. You don't have to wear them for those. You do more than one meditation. You only have to do one hour block a day. But if you choose to do more than one, some people do choose to do more than one, then if you would record the additional ones as well. You know, obviously what we're trying to do is capture the transition, these biosensors, to ongoing non-symbolic experience. And that, for most people, actually does not happen during meditation. But for some people it does, and so we'd like to have that data. We would love it if, you know, if it's your third meditation session of the day or something. You're like, I didn't wire myself up, but that was the one that I transitioned to ongoing non-symbolic experience in. We would have rather had that data. So if you would be so kind as to do that, we would appreciate it. People, the transition to ongoing non-symbolic experience that occurs during the course doesn't occur during meditation. You know, various practices and stuff, and that's actually the case. That was the case with the 1,200 or so people that participated in the research before, and frankly, the thousands of people that we've collected data on over the last 10 years. It often just happens sort of as you're going about your life, not while you're engaged in any sort of practice or anything like that. We see that same pattern in the course. There's something else that I can say about that, and that is that the transition in the course is often a very gradual transition for most people. So we did the early part of the research with the initial 1,200 people or so. What we found is that about 70% of people in that population reported an instant transition, like a light switch just flipping in them. And then about 30% of people reported sort of a transition that was more gradual over the course of days or weeks or hours or whatever, not months or something. I mean, a discernible, you know, in transition. In the Finders Course, it's pretty much been the exact opposite of that. So the Finders Course seems to be a protocol that phases most people in. There are instantaneous transitions for sure, but it seems to be a protocol that primarily phases people in over the course of a week. Or so, you know, that's sort of an interesting thing to keep in mind about it. Let's see, are you planning SC11? I probably am at FC11. And if yes, when? So the Finders Course is going to most likely be rolled into and become an official Sophia course, and part of a publicly announced degree program. It's in partnership with some pretty major people. And it's going to comprise and be the core initial sort of designed to transition people to ongoing non-symbolic experience. And so the Finders Course will live on beyond Finders Course 10. It will live on as a really not so much an experiment as more of just a class. That's going to be at, you know, Sophia credit numbers, and so it's about $1,025 per credit hour, something like that. So 6 credit hours, you can do the math on that, versus a couple of grand for the current Finders courses. We're not sure if we're going to keep it available or not as sort of an ongoing course. Outside of that, we think that we probably will, but we are not sure how we're going to manage it being in that system and outside of that system, and the price points involved and stuff like that. So that's what we know right now. We're very, very focused 10 at the moment. Chris asking, what happens if I get to location 1 after the course? What do I do to continue to location 4? You will know that based on the program. So as you go through the program, one of the things that you do pick up is that different methods are used to get to different locations. And if you don't know that terminology of locations and all that, these are just different types of persistent non-symbolic experience. That's something that you'll pick up on and essentially be trained on in the program. Let me see what else I can see here. Feel we've already experienced non-symbolic experience, but it isn't persistent. It is also is ongoing less than a year and persistent more than a year. Yes. So for our terminology, when we did the initial research, we defined the term persistent non-symbolic experience within the Academy years ago. And the cutoff for that was that you were persistent for more than a year. So if you were persistent for less than a year, you weren't considered for the study. Now, of course, we had people that were literally just over the line for a year. We had people who've been in it for decades. We ran FC, right? And now we're transitioning people, and you can't call them PNSE because they're less than a year, so we need a new term. So ongoing non-symbolic experience is the term that we came up with, less than a year. And if you feel that you've already experienced non-symbolic experience, that's fine. I would say for this program, we would really like to have people who do not have it persistently. Now, if you've experienced it, if you've got glimpses of it, whatever, that's fine. And it's not persistent, fine, come on in. We've had tons of people that said that over the years that came in and used the program successfully. And that should still give us the type of data that we want in terms of A/B data. However, if you're persistent in non-symbolic experience, they prefer, I think, people that took the course who weren't persistent. At a certain point, there's always some small, maybe 1 or 2 or 3 people in a course who discovers that when they read our definitions, about halfway through the course, you get a book. And that book contains an enormous amount of information about PNSE. It's never been released to the public. It's only used halfway through the program. And some people will read that and they'll be like, oh my gosh, I've been in location 1 or location 2 or whatever for years. And then they communicate that to us. And of course, we have to take account of that in the data. And so that could happen to you. You could be one of those people. And we'll deal with that. And, we'll just sort of process your data slightly differently, maybe hold it aside from the main group of people, and also pay attention to probably transition to later locations in the course. That's a common pattern that happens. And so we'll use your data to look at the data for shifting to later locations or whatnot. I don't totally preclude people that are experiencing even persistent forms of this from joining the course, but we really, really like people who are wanting to experience it persistently for the first time. That's really the data that we're primarily after. A lot of data. You've got to really have a lot of data to use with the analytics methods that we're using. And so there won't be enough people to meaningfully analyze persistent people moving to later locations type stuff. Let's see what else we got here. Merv saying, I presume that the persistent non-symbolic consciousness does not mean the loss of one's individual boundaries. Without those boundaries, it might be dangerous just crossing the road. Yeah, so that's one of the fascinating things about this, actually. Personality remains. So just yesterday, I was conducting research right now, and I was in Fairfield, Iowa yesterday, which many of you probably know is the home of Transcendental Meditation in America. They have their university there and stuff like that. And so I have a series of long-term research relationships with a lot of different subjects. Some of those people are in Fairfield, Iowa. So I was just sort of doing a routine follow-up sort of visit with those individuals. And there's a very well-known person who's purported to be sort of one of the furthest, one of the most enlightened people, if you will, in Fairfield, who was doing a book signing. And I was really pleased that he made a lot of the points that he made, because he was sort of in an audience that had observed what I might call spiritual salesmanship. The supportive, everything's rosy on the other side of PNSE or whatever else. Your life is it's just the golden road flows out from, in front of you, and you want to manifest something, you just think, oh, I'd like to manifest that, and poof, it appears in front of you. All of these different ideas that have been used to sort of sell PNSE in its various forms around the world for a very long time. And he was very, very straightforward in knocking down all of the spiritual salesmanship, and I thought that was really great. The other thing that as a component of that, one of the things that we talked about was the fact that personality really just kind of continues on. Your relationship with it changes, your experience of it, but you certainly are still able to cross the road effectively. Chances are, you've still got the same habits, you've still got the same food preferences in many cases. You still dress the same way. Don't forget how to dress yourself. A lot of stuff. These different layers of us. And this was one of the things that was very confusing to me for a long time in the research, was that there seems to be this outer shell that is our personality that maybe is primarily just responses that we've learned over time in response to the environment, some genetic stuff in there, all of that. And then what actually changes from a PNSE perspective is something deeper, something more fundamental than that, such that you can actually have a transition to ongoing non-symbolic experience and not have anybody notice. There's all kinds of people, even people who are very far along and who fell in very far along the continuum. You can land in location 1, location 2, 3, 4. They can all be your first experience of this. We've not had anyone in our research that landed beyond location 4. I don't think it's impossible, but we haven't had anybody report that. But there have been people who landed straight into location 4, and one guy, it was kind of a famous story. He talks about going to work. He comes up out of a yoga asana that he's done a million times, and he's gone. He's just boom. He's in location 4, and he's got to go to work, and he's got a really high-end, demanding job. And on the way home from work that night, he's like, I'm not even sure anybody noticed anything was different about me, when to him, inside, internally, everything had changed. And so it's that layer of that conditioned response that forms our personality or whatnot, that seems quite durable. And sometimes, a lot of times, people don't even pick up on the external change. And that's very, very baffling, very confusing, because if you feel totally different inside, but other people aren't really noticing it, it's very much a surprise to you. So there are things like that. You don't have to worry too much about, whether or not you're going to be able to still tie your shoes or function or whatever. Occasionally you hear people talk about falling so deeply into it that they sit on a park bench for 2 years, or whatever else. There's sort of a reconstitution of the senses in some cases that needs to occur. Those are, I'm concerned a little bit about that lore being out there in the public, because those are people who often have a tendency to abandon the rest of their life and go become teachers and write books and stuff, and they represent a minuscule part of the population. The vast majority of the people who transition to PNSE never experience anything even remotely like that. They continue to remain highly functional. So the disproportionate number of this tiny little minority, this really just infinitesimally tiny little minority of people who experience things like that and then change their whole life and become the ones who write the books and do the teaching and all of that, they're not necessarily doing people a service, because they look scary, right? Like, oh my God, I could lose my whole family and my job and everything else. This could be a whole disaster. I'm too afraid to transition to this. Whereas, the reality is that 99.99999% of people are out there transitioning, and it's such a phenomenally better thing right away. Okay, so here. Nicole, we've been going for about an hour at this point, and we said that we were going to go for about an hour. Are you feeling like we should wrap it up? Or are you still seeing a lot of questions come in that you want to respond to? What do you want to do here?
Oh, I guess I just realized that, see, Annalisa said it would, I was answering the questions in the chat, but I don't think that, I don't know if everybody saw those answers. I think it might have just gone to the person who was answering it. Oh, rats. I didn't realize everyone couldn't see the answers. Well, I guess I can write up an FAQ, and we can have that for everyone. So I can do that with the questions that were, oh yeah, Rebecca just confirmed none of the rats. I was working so hard and nobody saw it. Okay. All right, everybody. So what I'm going to do.
I think we can download the chat log maybe.
Yeah. So, okay. So everybody, what I will do is I will download this chat log, and I'm going to write up the FAQs from all the questions everybody asked. I'm so sorry that you couldn't see them. I thought I was doing a good thing over here. So, so we'll fix that, and I'll get you an FAQ so you can read all the answers to the questions. But Jeffrey did a pretty good job of answering a lot of questions, and sometimes when I was halfway through with the answer, he would answer the question, and so my answer includes, oh, Jeffrey's answering that right now. But in any case, you'll get it printed out so you can see it and read it. And I'll try to get that done for you the next 24 hours. It looks like the webinar has frozen. Can anyone hear me? Okay. All right, everybody. Yes. So we lost. Sorry about that. So we lost Jeffrey. He just got disconnected, and so he is coming back in. I guess. Does anyone have any questions for me? Does anyone have a question for me? Hi, Peggy. What's your question? Oh, hi, Rebecca. I'm doing fine. I'm doing fine. I'll give you a call afterwards too. We need to catch up. Um, let's see. There's some questions about yes, Jeffrey answered the question about how much time people are meditating every day, and then
Well, guys, I think we may have been. See me again? Can you hear me again? I lost connection, and Nicole lost connection. I see a yep from Michael, but I don't know if that means. Well, I'd say we've picked a good time to give up. So let's go ahead and wrap this. Thank you very much for joining us. Oh, Nicole's popped back in, so I don't know. Can I have somebody just tell me if they can hear me? Say, yes, I hear you, Jeffrey, in chat. Oh, Patty. Hi, Patty. How are you? Patty, another awesome alumni, if you can hear me. Saying that they can hear me in chat. So, Nicole, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay. Well, we can talk to each other if nothing else. All right, you want to wrap up here?
Yeah, let's go ahead and wrap it up.
That's good. Well, thank you very much. We're going to have an automatic replay of this generated, and so you will be able to see the chat, at least whatever was visible during it. So the videos, YouTube and stuff, but I recommend not watching it back on YouTube. I recommend watching it back with the replay link that you'll get, the chat and stuff like that. Now, I hope that if you're interested in Finders Course 10, certainly I hope that you'll consider joining and helping us out. I think the research is incredibly important. I really do believe that we have an incredible opportunity in terms of you and your own life. And, it's another Finders Course, and over 70% of people transition to ongoing non-symbolic experience when we run these things, all that. That's all great. That's great from a personal standpoint for you, and you can look at all of our stuff in terms of what that means. But I think that one of the other things that's really of this is that we really need to reach a critical mass of people in order to be able to use the very sophisticated mathematical techniques and to really mine this data. And one thing about the Finders course is that as awesome as it is, it's probably not going to scale to billions of people. It's just too time consuming. It's too time consuming, right? It requires broadband internet and all sorts of stuff. And so we've got to move this ball ahead by getting to the next generation of technology. I think the Finders course, as far as I know, is the most effective thing in the world at getting people to ongoing non-symbolic experience in a fast, reliable, safe, etc. way. But I still consider it incredibly clunky, primitive, by what I think we can get to with technology. So even though it's, as far as I know, the best, and if there was something else we could have used, we certainly would have used it. I'm not someone who reinvents the wheel. I am happy to use other people's stuff to get the data that I'm interested in for research. And so the Finders course exists ultimately because we couldn't get that data anywhere else. And that's great. And what it enables for you is fantastic. But what we really need to do is push this ball ahead for humanity. And I really personally believe that that's going to be done with some sort of interface with technology and with the transition to what we call precision meditation. And we think that we'll be able to mine all this data and get a lot of low-hanging stuff out of it, like, what meditation for someone to use for focusing? What's the best meditation for someone to use for relaxation? How should they use it for 24 minutes a day or 26 minutes a day or an hour and a half a day? What's the optimum time? Should it be morning or night? Should they do it one day a week or one day a month or every single day? I think there's all sorts of sort of personalized precision meditation stuff and data that can come out of this. But what we're really interested in, that's great, that's all low-hanging fruit, we think, that stuff's all going to be in there. But what we're really, really interested in is the PNSE stuff and really sort of moving ahead that transition to ongoing and persistent forms of non-symbolic experience and enabling that in as wide a swath of the population as we possibly can. And we just feel like that's going to be done using some sort of objective technologies. We're as far as we can go, sort of with where we're at right now. And I think the success and the frankly just the effectiveness that we've seen to this point is incredible. But it's also, I think, almost nothing compared to what's possible moving further down the road. I think you probably know that Nicole and I are also founders of the transformative technology space, which is basically trying to pull together all of Silicon Valley and technologists all around the world to really address this problem with every technology that you can think of, everything from user interfaces to brain zappers. And so, we've really dedicated our lives to try to push this ball forward. And this experiment, from our standpoint, was super, super, super important in that effort. So we hope that you'll join us. We could use all the people on board this thing. And I think that's about all I have to say at this point. Nicole, do you want to wrap up anything on your side?
I just want to add for everyone, if you'd like to understand the broader context of the work that we're doing, like Jeffrey said, check out the Transformative Technology Lab, check out the conference. You can see talks by both Jeffrey and I think it'll really help you understand the wider framework, and then also our intentions with what we're trying to contribute, and the community that we're supporting to contribute to the world, because there really is no more nobler use of technology than to help bring peace to the minds of mankind. And that's really what we need. I think we've seen, especially over the last year, the need for people to be able to transition to higher levels of consciousness. So that's that's all I'd like to say, and I'm really hoping that you join us.
Okay, thanks so much. We're going to stop the webinar Q&A at this point, and hope you have a wonderful morning and or afternoon and or evening, depending upon where you are in the world today. Thanks a lot for your time. We really appreciate it.
Bye, everybody.